thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down with us and talk a little bit about your organization and your experience here in Africa. If you'd like to take a moment or two and just give us a little context and background, that would be really helpful.
Pleased to, Bob. Thank you. Actually, I'm a partner with McCarthy Tétrault, which is a prominent Canadian law firm. We're about 600 lawyers, and we've got offices from Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, Montreal, Quebec City, and London. We've been involved in doing business in Africa for a long time, in various areas, telecommunications and energy and mining, etc. But about 3 years ago, we decided to have even more emphasis on our practice in Africa, and we created an Africa initiative within the firm, which is to basically structure our activity and put in more emphasis and involve more time in the process. So I've had the privilege to be asked to be the co-leader, the national co-leader of the Africa initiative with one of my colleagues in the London office. And so in the last 3 years, we've been accentuating our involvement here at all levels. And it's been just great. Last year, for example, I personally spent about 4 months in Africa on various files and matters, and I think there's a great opportunity for obviously for my firm, but also for Canadian business in general. Africa is definitely a place to be. The growth perspectives are absolutely phenomenal, and I think there's a great business case for Canadians, just generally Canadian companies, to be involved. And that's what basically motivated ourselves to try to actually push us a little further was the fact that, first of all, Canada is so well respected. We've got such a great international reputation that we often, I think, underestimate at times. It's just a great calling card to have.
You're fine.
Make believe. And also, we're bilingual. A lot of us are bilingual. On the legal side, we've been used to working in both legal systems, obviously with the civil law in Quebec and the common law. And we just have sweet spots that just match perfectly from a business perspective what's happening in Africa. So obviously natural resources, oil and gas, mining, energy, telecommunications. We just basically have expertise that is worldwide, it's really recognized internationally, that we can table on and just show up and do business. And it's absolutely amazing. It might sound a little intimidating at times to say, listen, I'm looking at the perspective of wanting to do business in Africa. Mm-hmm. But actually, Africans love Canadians. We're very welcome. We have great staff at the embassies that can support you. And I think I encourage anybody who wants to look into this to either contact the Canadian Council for Africa, obviously, because that's the organization that actually leads or helps, and regroups Canadian companies that are actually active in Africa. But also, if you decide to go on the field, the Canadian embassies have trade commissioners that can be extremely, extremely helpful. So it's not like if you're starting by yourself. There's more and more trade missions. The government of Canada, obviously, and provinces. Quebec, for example, has had several trade missions also. You get involved in a trade mission, and you'll have a group of people that you can share with, and that have the same objectives that you have to basically develop business in Africa. And you work with the embassies. There's a dynamic that makes it actually much more easier than anticipated. And here will be more than welcome by the locals to actually.
From your experience, Pierre, can you share a few lessons learned? You've been in doing business all these years. What are organizations going to face coming into, in terms of culture, I suppose, and the sort of different frameworks you're entering into to work in these countries here in Africa? What are the couple lessons you've learned that you would be willing to share with the viewers?
Absolutely. Well, it's obviously challenging. It's actually, it makes it actually fascinating also. I mean, it all depends what your perspective is. Most people like to travel and they like to find out about new places, new cultures, and it's basically the same angle when you're doing business. You're actually, except you're approaching it from a business perspective, but it's essentially the same thing. It's fascinating. I think you want to do a little bit of your homework. You want to know a little bit about the country. You want to know a little bit about what the religious customs are. There's just the basic things that when you're traveling that you maybe emphasize a little bit. What the business way of doing business also. Just small things, just to make sure that you don't make a false step somewhere. But even if you do, it's not. You know, I don't think it's fatal, or that people will really actually react very strongly. It's just
should organizations anticipate a long lead time, for example, to get a deal underway, or so that's the kind of thing I think people want to know what kind of investment they're going to make to get on the ground and up and running.
Right. Well, it's a very good question. Actually, to be perfectly frank, the efficiency of the Canadian or North American way of doing business is not actually. You will obviously have a little bit of a déphasage, I would say in French. In other words, it's a little slower. You don't have the tools that are as efficient and as accommodating. You obviously have to deal with a little bit of that. So you've got to probably give yourself a little bit more time. What you can do at home with all the technology that you have nearby, and our North American way of doing things, which is basically efficiency, video, conference call, fax documents, word process, which we're very, very efficient in doing business. When you come here, you have to realize that actually their culture is very much still the culture of building relationships. So I think the one comment is you can't be thinking of doing business in Africa without wanting to invest in some face time.
Relationships.
Yes, and there's actually a merit to that. There's actually a merit to that because they do build trust and relationships with you, and it actually is very good because, as from a business perspective, you're actually building on solid ground. So that's maybe a little different. Where we would think it's inefficient, for them it's getting to know you.
I see.
And I think you've got to take certainly that into account. And also, obviously, things will take a little longer. There's a joke that's been made that I've heard. I think it's something about you guys have watchers, we have time.
I see.
And basically saying that obviously some of that. So from a patient's perspective, from an efficiency perspective, you might find it a little different than back home. But again, there's advantages to it, and it's certainly not something that will make you not want to do business. It's just a little different way of doing it. I don't think I've ever seen anybody saying, I don't want to go back to do business here, because it's it takes a little bit more time to get things done.
Would you share a little bit of perspective on the legal profession, where you've been able to play a role in advancing trade between Canada and between Canada and African nations? Where have you, where has that focus been for you?
Well, I basically have, I should start by saying I have three hats. So I'm obviously a partner of McCarthy's and developing business from that perspective, but I'm also a member of the board of the Canadian Council of Africa. And so on that level, I'm involved also, and I'm actually presiding the Committee on Government Relations. So all that aspect is something where I actually, from a minimal perspective, I'm investing time to try to help facilitate things at that level. I'm also with the Canadian Institute of Mining with VP Africa for them, because the Canadian Institute, SIM, actually decided to invest in Africa just about at the same time as I was doing it with McCarthy's.
I see.
So I'm actually involved with SIM. So I've come at it from different angles, and when I'm working with SIM, it's also from a perspective of helping. For example, SIM is working at developing branches of the CIM in some African countries to help them with state-of-the-art practices, better practices, safety, all that angle.
So it sounds like a real pool of stakeholders that are kind of fundamentally working closely together to kind of launch into building the trade outcome.
Absolutely. It's all the players, and actually you definitely, when you participate, you come in a trade mission, for example, you really have the impression of being part of a Team Canada.
You get that here, I suppose.
Absolutely. Everybody helps each other out, and there's definitely a team perspective, and you're happy for somebody who scores.
Wins.
Even if it's not necessarily the sector that you're involved, because you're just happy to have somebody else, hey, I just got a new contract.
That's great.
And there's that team spirit that's definitely there.
Would you just, to get kind of wrap this up a little bit, what would you say in final point on your experience over here in Africa, down here in South Africa? How would you sum it all up in terms of all the different activities you've been involved in, and events and introductions and so on?
I think you should get involved. I think Africa is definitely, for the next 50 years, it's going to be just an international playground where businesses, it's the place to be for business right now. Wouldn't want you to miss out on the action in the sense of because of maybe perspectives that we have. Check it out. Find out a little bit more, because if your business is in a situation where you want to increase your revenues and you're in a saturated market and you're looking for other markets, you should definitely consider Africa, because it's just a place to be. I mean, we were in Côte d'Ivoire last week. Côte d'Ivoire's economic growth rate was close to 10% in the last 2 years. It's going to be projections of 10% again for the next 2 years. And I think out of the first 20 fastest growing economies, and I might not have the number right, but I think it's around 12 or 13 are African countries.
Here on the continent.
Absolutely. So there's just tremendous opportunities to grow your business. And
I guess people, in some respects, have to overcome some of the stereotypes, right?
Absolutely.
And this is the big challenge, it seems to me, Africa has, to just try to empower people to not watch CNN and judge the whole.
You've probably heard this before, but there's 54 countries and a billion population. Some people, unfortunately, kind of see Africa from a perspective like it's a country rather than a continent. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's extremely different. South and North Africa are extremely different. West Africa also. So it's a very, very huge country with just different perspectives. And I saw something really interesting. It's a study, I believe, by an accounting firm, and they were basically polling people about doing business in Africa. And what they realized is that they had a certain average percentage. What was interesting is when they dug in a little bit further, they found out that out of the people that had never been to Africa, 80% were thinking that they're not going to do business in Africa. 20% were considering it. When they asked the same question to people that have been in Africa once to do business, the curve was totally
the other way.
80% were saying to go back. Only 20% of the people that have been there once would say they're not going to do business there. So you're right. There are some. There's a popular misconception about Africa, and it's definitely a place that you can do business. It's obviously there are some countries that have going through difficult times at times, but there's 54 countries, and you can easily choose in accordance with your business objectives and your strengths which countries you want to be working in, and great opportunities. And I think everybody that's thinking about growing their markets and has an inclination to look at it, take a good look, because it's for us it's been just great.
In the law profession, and what other sectors, like what are the obvious verticals or lines of business that are
obviously,
mining's huge.
Mining in Indaba, it's a spearhead. The mining industry obviously is one of our fortes, and there's a lot of action here.
All the extensions out of the mining, I suppose.
We've got a whole industry in Canada that's the whole chain, the whole service sector that goes with it. So it's a great opportunity. But we also have oil and gas is obviously another big player for, especially our expertise out west we have on that. Energy is a huge component in Canada. We've got tremendous expertise also, and that is I actually think that energy is probably going to be a bigger factor than mining.
Okay.
There's this great picture that's been taken of the world at night, and you've probably seen that. I don't know if you've seen that, but you obviously have the black continent, and you see that at night. It's not well lit up in Africa. Well, you can say, "Oops, it's a little difficult," but actually, it's a tremendous opportunity. They just need.
It's a serious, big upside for where they're going to need Canadian know-how.
Absolutely. You've got obviously telecom also, agro business. Obviously, you've got to feed. There's a lot of mouths to feed in Africa, and it's basically they've got to increase. They've got to take their game to another level. They need to grow their middle class. They will grow the middle class. What's happening too is unfortunately they had a lot of money. There was a lot of money that was made, which unfortunately didn't get into the right hands. That's changing. There's anti-corruption legislation that's coming along. People that are now companies that are dealing with African nations now make sure that it's not necessarily that the money is ear tagged to the right place. So there's going to be a lot of development. There's going to be a huge middle class that's going to grow. It's basically China and India a little further down the line. I remember a long ways back going to China was like inconceivable, and it's become such a great power.
The CCA then has been a a good partner in introducing organizations to the market here.
Absolutely. We've been meeting with some of the ministers that are here on the federal side discussing CCAfrica, and obviously there is definitely merit in teaming up with people that have the same interests as you do, who've been through experiences and then share that. And again, there's a camaraderie that comes out of it where you're actually working with teams. You're happy. I'm working on the legal side. I've got various clients, but I know of different players, and I might be in a business situation for a specific client. But I'm aware that from that, just from the discussion with people that we're dealing with, that there are other business opportunities for other players, clients or not, that we'll try to put in perspective. And I think you've got that very much that team spirit.
Through that forum. Well, thank you very much. This has been very informative. I appreciate your time and point of view on trade with Africa.
Thank you very much, Bob. Appreciate it.
It's been great.
Thank you.